Good afternoon, Your Highnesses, Excellencies, dignitaries, and members of the ABLF network. My name is Mukherjee, and I'm a policy and strategy specialist based in London. I am, as ever, delighted to be here at the ABLF City. The man I'm going to be speaking with shortly needs absolutely no introduction, particularly to Asian brides around the world. Sabyasachi Mukherjee has designed wedding lehengas for world-famous stars such as Priyanka Chopra and Deepika Padukone. His design philosophy is simple. He believes that clothes should be an extension of one's intellect. His hometown of Kolkata has been a lifelong inspiration for him, and I'm excited to be interviewing him so soon after he made a really exciting announcement. So without further ado, Sabyasachi, you shared a really exciting announcement about your new line for Bergdorf last week. Can you tell us a little bit about this and why you see this as such a positive work, not only for your work, but also Indian fashion?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. When I was a young designer, I was showing at New York Fashion Week, and I always, like many other designers all over the world, I wanted to be at Bergdorf's. I had an agent, and I was selling to many stores. Of course, I didn't make it to Bergdorf. I didn't even have a line sheet at that point of time. But I was a little disappointed because everybody wanted me to make clothing that suited their sensibility, and I think my Indian voice was getting stunted. So I decided to come back to India and start again. And I realized that, if you're not successful in your own country, it's very difficult for you to have a voice of dominance somewhere else. So I came back to India. I started doing Indian clothes. I made a name for myself, and then slowly and slowly, as when I returned to America, they realized the importance of the brand and also the sway that it held over Indians, millions of Indians all over the world. And now, much like the Middle East, much like China, India is not just a production hub anymore. India is a big consumption hub as well. And you can't ignore the depth and the width of that market. So the testimonial that I'm selling at Bergdorf next to Chanel and Dior, and I'm selling Indian clothes, saris and lehengas apart from my international line, is heartening because Bergdorf's not just included a designer, they've included a country. And I think it's a great moment for everybody, all Indians all across the world, because finally we get acknowledged not just as a production hub, but also a consumption hub and a design hub as well.
Well, this Indian is certainly very excited to get to New York and see you right there. You've talked also about expanding into other markets, and I know, of course, that you are not just designing beautiful clothes, but jewelry as well. So can you tell us a little bit about your vision for your jewelry and your expansion plans there? Where might we be able to get your jewelry in the near future?
Not many people know that I started doing jewelry much before I started doing clothes. I used to actually sell jewelry in roadside stores in Calcutta, and they were costume jewelry. And I didn't have enough money at that point of time, but I told myself that once I have a stronger point of view and once I have social dominance, I'll start getting back into jewelry again. The reason why I started doing jewelry in India was because I was very frustrated because I didn't think the quality that I was seeing everywhere was good enough and the aesthetic didn't match my clothing. And you know that the Instagram picture for a bride is so important that it has to be a combination of clothing, jewelry, makeup, beauty, everything put together. So I said, check clothing, check jewelry, maybe at some point of time, check beauty. So we want to do jewelry the Sabyasachi way. We have a very unique point of view when it comes to jewelry. We do beautiful traditional modern jewelry. And the good news is that we are in conversations with a company in Dubai. So maybe we'll add a jewelry store, Sabyasachi jewelry store very soon.
I'm sure all of our audience members in Dubai are super excited for the day that happens. When did you realize as a designer that you'd made it? Was there a particular milestone that you'd wanted to reach, or did you just wake up one day and suddenly realize everybody around the world knows my brand and my name?
I think the moment happened during London Fashion Week. Mrs. B, who owns the iconic Brown's store in South Molton Street, they bought my collection, and legend has it that if she puts somebody on the windows of Brown's during London Fashion Week, that person is going to become a future superstar.
Wow.
So I also made it into a list of top 5 emerging designers in Vogue, British Vogue. And listen, she's got a exemplary record because she discovered McQueen and Galliano. And I remember going with a friend of mine to see the window at Brown's, and I saw very familiar clothes staring back at me. For a second, I was in denial because I didn't even want to acknowledge that they were my clothes because I didn't know what it meant. And then that day I realized that my God, this is a prophecy. And I have always had many opportunities in my life, and I think success comes to those who man up and stand up tall to kind of embrace those opportunities. I worked very hard. And like, Madonna had said it once that she came to New York, she worked very hard. She wanted to be rich, she wanted to be famous, and her dream came true. I don't know if I wanted to be rich or famous, but I wanted to do good clothes, and I'm happy that I'm able to do so.
It's interesting that you mentioned not being sure you wanted to be famous, because you've mentioned in the past that you think one of the reasons your brand is so relevant is because in some ways you're irrelevant, which I think personally, I'm not saying that, I think you're very relevant, but that's interesting that you view that as a reason for your brand being more relevant. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and how you position yourself as the man behind this brand?
So very early on, I told a friend of mine that if I need to sell myself to sell my clothes, I'd rather not do clothes at all. I'm not a very social person. I'm quite reticent. And, during the lockdown, I've been living in my house. This is my office in my garden. And for 1 year, and I had a lot of me time that I never had. I thrive in being on with myself. So it's difficult to exist with that kind of a sensibility in fashion because it's a very social business. But having said that, very soon, like in the last few years, the brand morphed from I to we. A year ago, I told Manav, who handles my Instagram account, to change the status. It had my face on my Instagram account. I said, remove my face and keep the tiger, because that is a logo for the brand. And I think I look at myself as a facilitator. We work in a very large group. It's almost becoming a corporate now with ABFRL buying into the company. I want to be able to preserve the legacy of Sabyasachi, and I isolate myself from the business because I think the business and me, we just happen to have the same name, and I keep it to that.
Very interesting. You've said in the past that to build a global brand, you need to build something indigenous in context. So how does your label support Indian textiles and handlooms in that context? What do you see as important to making sure that your clothes maintain that connection?
I'm often asked by many forums, what is your advice to young designers? And I keep telling them only one thing. I said, believe in yourself and have patience, and very soon the world will start believing in you. It's very, very important for anybody in the art and craft field or anybody in the fashion industry to have a point of view which is unique and which is their own, because a customer doesn't really come to you to just buy clothing, because then it's only clothing. They come to you to hear your story. And I think what you see around you and who you really are and your cultural identity defines you. And I said to myself right from the beginning that I'm first a designer from Calcutta, then a designer from India, and then a global designer. So for me to be able to have global relevance, it is very important for me to have cultural relevance that's very local. So we source extensively out of West Bengal, my home state, and also out of India. But having said that, I'm also someone who loves cross-cultural elements. So I'm a traveler. Even if I'm not traveling physically, I travel through my mind's eye. And I pick up references from all over the world because I enjoy art and craft, because I think the use of culture, the use of handicraft, the use of human dexterity is what makes fashion luxury. You can't really create a fashionable fashion brand or a luxury brand out of mechanical production. It needs to have human hands involved.
Wow. And speaking about you being the designer from Calcutta and then India and then international, you've done some incredibly impressive partnerships or collaborations with brands ranging from Christian Louboutin to H&M and many others around the world. How do you decide who and how to collaborate with? How do you match the design sensibilities? And what is the process like for one of these big collaborations?
Barring Christian Louboutin, all the rest of the collaborations, whether it's been L'Oreal, whether it's been H&M, Pottery Barn, Asian Paints, I have one single-minded agenda that one has to tell the craft story of India. I'm a very proud Indian. And Sadhguru from India had said something like the fact that it's been a democracy for about 70, 80 years, but it's been a cultured civilization for thousands of years. And I never forget that there is so much that India can offer to the world, and I speak that from a point of mild arrogance, because I think that it's important for the world to be able to recognize what India stands for and what India has to offer. And whenever I do a collaboration, I become a ferryman between India and the globe, and I try to take the Indian story forward. With Christian, it was a completely different story. I remember Christian had come into my store in Mumbai, and it was raining, and he, of course, didn't know who I was, but I knew who he was. And I had lost my wallet, so I came to take some money from my accountant because I needed to check into my hotel, and I was wearing really muddy flip-flops. And Christian looks at me head to toe, looks at my feet, looks at me, and then he says, "Where do you think I could find Sabyasachi?" For a second, I stared down at my feet and I said, "Should I even tell the shoemaker of the world that this is me?" And then I said, "Okay, fine, I am Sabyasachi." He was quite taken aback. He expected me to probably walk into the store in an elephant, but I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops. We started talking. We started talking about everything apart from business. So we started talking about food. We realized that we have a lot of common things together, and the friendship morphed into a business conversation. We both decided that we'll do a collaboration together. He was very excited about my body of work, and he said that I've never really done a big design collaboration globally, and let's do one. And that's how it started. It just started over a meal and conversations over food. Trust you to put a Parisian and a Bengali across a food table, and magic will happen.
I also have this wonderful mental image of your first meeting now. I don't think I'll ever be able to walk past one of yours or his stores without thinking about that now. You've talked a lot about sustainability in the textile industry. So given the current unprecedented challenges, do you think that COVID is going to serve as an impetus to us accelerating the transition to a more sustainability conscious industry?
The good thing about COVID is the fact that it gave us all time to spend with ourselves, and many good and bad things will come out of it, because I think we have dialogues and conversations with everybody all around the world, but the I say the most challenging journey is the journey inwards. Put us in a room with ourselves and we wouldn't know what to do. So I think the good thing that's happened to many people worldwide, at least in terms of consumption, is people have realized what is necessary and what is just floss. And I think it'll lead to mindful consumption. And when I talk about sustainability in fashion, it actually starts not with mindful production, it starts with mindful consumption. It is the consumer who will demand sustainability by deciding to be more conscious about consumption. I think that's happening globally. No longer can you sell a product just by big marketing lines and taglines and just putting a brand across a product. I think brands which are going to be conscious about their value proposition, brands which are going to help in building communities, brands which are going to tell authentic stories of travel, culture, craft are going to be brands of the future. So I think in many ways, sustainability is going to be championed a lot after COVID, is because we have realized that it's one finite world that we have, and we all have to collectively work together in making it better.
And I like that you speak about consumers driving the industry forward, because you've also spoken about the importance of consumers when it comes to shifting your fashion shows onto Instagram. So I don't want to give too much away without you telling the story, but how was that decision made to show on Instagram, and how has that impacted your brand in the industry?
Resham, I was born middle class, and the beautiful thing about being born middle class in India is that you die middle class. Your value systems that your parents and your grandparents teach you never leave you. So I understand what it is to be excluded, because I didn't have enough money. I could barely afford to ever go into a five-star hotel, or I could barely go to a fancy restaurant, or I could not go to, we didn't even have malls at that point of time, but I could not afford leisure and luxury. So we all had to make do with playing cricket and football on the streets, and whatever we lacked in terms of money, we made it through imagination. So I think that when I wanted to do Instagram, I thought of many other people in this country who would be the future Sabyasachis, probably at one point of time who would be future consumers. I think fashion plays a very elitist game, which sometimes can be very defeating for its purpose of wider growth. And while it's nice to be exclusive, I think you should be exclusive by gumption of your product and the craft that you put into it, not through the way you message and position yourself. I decided to do Instagram because I thought that, why should my clothing be restricted to only a few 500 people on the runway? It should be shown to the entire world. And many people warned me about it because we are extensively copied. And I said it doesn't matter because I think one needs to just take a democratic approach towards growth. And why alienate a consumer who's going to become a future consumer? He or she might not be a consumer for you today, but 100% can be a future consumer as you start doing more entry-level products. So I decided to put everything on Instagram.
And how do you feel about that? I mean, you must walk around different cities and see copies of your clothes. You've inspired so many other brands and so many other stores. Does it bother you? Does it flatter you? How do you feel about that?
So I'll tell you a small story. I was shooting for Ban Baja Bride, a TV show that I do. And we were shooting in New Delhi in Chandni Chowk. And I was standing and I was waiting for my crew to arrive because I was early. Then one of these touts on the street started pulling my hand and said that, have you come here to buy wedding lehengas? So I looked at him puzzled and he said, come, I'll show you some wedding lehengas. Right now I can show you a new collection that is Sabyasachi's collection. I'll show it to you. So I pretended not to know who Sabyasachi was, and he looked at me like incredulously. He said, "You don't know who Sabyasachi is, and you've come to buy a wedding lehenga?" I said, "No, should I know him?" So he showed me some clothes which were not even horrifically, not even close to something that we do. He just tried to sell me a fake Sabyasachi that didn't look like a Sabya at all. But then you realize it humbles you because this man was wearing just a simple T-shirt and a pair of torn slippers and a drain pipe trouser. And I said that, some good thing must be happening with our brand that we actually support so many livelihoods directly and indirectly. When you look at it as an occupational hazard, it will bother you. But when you look at it as God's democratic approach to communism, then you realize that it's okay because, if you push one good thing in the universe, other people will come and take a share of the pie, and you have to learn to live with it.
I think that's a beautiful philosophy. I'll try and think more about pushing beautiful things going forward. You relatively recently have come in the news with the fact that you have sold a controlling stake or a majority stake of Sabyasachi to the Birla Group. How did that come about, and what do you think that means for your brand and for the fashion industry as a whole?
First, let me speak for myself. I'm 47 years old. I don't have any children, and I didn't want the brand to die with me. And I have been planning to sell my company for the last 5 years. I've had many opportunities before from luxury houses, from a lot of funds to be able to sell a part of my company, but I didn't want to because for 20 years I wanted to build what I would call the basement of a really tall building. And I said that once I establish the foundations of the business, I'll start selling the business out. When you sell like I say that, getting an investment is like a function of business. Like not many people know that Valentino is funded by a Qatari fund. And, people think that Valentino is an Italian brand. And so similarly, with the Birlas, me and Kumar Mangalam Birla have been friends for a long time, and we have been talking about the future of the brand. I had said that, when I'm ready for investment, I would go to him and we would have a conversation. And in spirit, it's a 51% in contract, but I actually have controlling stakes because of the fact that I control the entire business creatively. And together, we are also going to create a legacy. We are going to start creating transition of power, because many designers worldwide make the mistake of transitioning power either when they are financially distressed or when they are too old or the company is not doing well. I think the trick of selling and the art of creating a deal is when you are at your strongest, so that you can negotiate a deal which is not only going to be good for your present, but also going to be great for your future and the country's future. And I've said to many people that, the brand does not belong to me anymore. It belongs to the country at large. And I cannot be selfish with it. I cannot own the brand just because of personal ownership. I have a very big problem with ownership. I don't even own any art because everything that I own, I put it out in my stores for people to see. I think it's very important when you have something good to be able to be not selfish about it and to be conscious about the fact that you need to preserve it for the continuity of greater good.
Well, I think people around the world and future brides are sighing in relief that you're going to be designing for the future. So now that you've built this basement of your very tall building, what's the future for you? Do you have future collaborations in mind? What does 2021, 2025 look like for you?
Well, as they say, my plate is full. We have a lot of things to announce, and they'll gradually get announced over the course of the next 1.5 years. And there's so much to do because the brand has already left clues with collaborations. So Sabyasachi Beauty, Sabyasachi Home, maybe at some point of time I really want to do hospitality because I think I have great talent in that. And then of course there is clothing. There's 100% going to be a fragrance somewhere down the line. Eyewear to start with, at some point of time ready to wear. So there's so much to do, and I keep thinking, my God, it's one life. But now with Kumar and the Birla machinery, I think we will slowly and slowly start creating the first luxury brand out of India.
Wow, God, so much to do. I don't envy your to-do list. Your first collection at Lucknow Fashion Week was so well received, you became an overnight success. You were the only Indian designer invited to Milan Fashion Week in 2004. So you've been at the top of your game for a really, really long time. How do you continue to innovate, and how do you keep staying at the top of the game? Does that pressure ever get to you?
No, I think I do well because I don't take myself seriously. And also, I surround myself with friends who have nothing to do with the fashion industry, so it helps me get perspective about fame and ridiculousness. And I I work very hard. If I were to say so, I work really hard. I tackle every project that I do, every shoot that I do, every collection that I do as my first piece. I never lose my sense of wonderment because I lead a very sheltered life. So every time I go out in the world, I think there's so much surprise for me. Like I remember I was interviewing Renzo Russo, who was the who owned Diesel, and he said the same thing. He said that they live on the outskirts of Italy in small villages. So when they go to New York, they're quite awestruck by the wonderment of how diverse and large the globe is. And I have pretty much the same thing. I live a very sheltered life in Calcutta. So I think when you learn to protect yourself, you stop being jaded. And I think that's the most important thing of being successful, that you have to strive to keep your mind innocent so that you don't get jaded.
And where does your inspiration come from? Obviously, you're coming up to your 1-year anniversary of being forced to stay in your house. Where is your inspiration coming from? Is there a particular routine or a particular place you go to get that inspiration for future collections?
I think I'm a dreamer, and that's where the inspiration comes from. So it could come from anything. It could be, I could be lying down on the grass and staring at a jet plane, or I could be reading a book, or I could be watching a movie, or eating food and imagining things, or a piece of music, or travel. I think when you have a mind that's hyperactive and almost childlike, you're never short of imagination.
Oh, God, must be a beautiful place to be in your mind sometimes. How do you deal with imposter syndrome and confidence? Do you ever feel nervous before you release a collection? Do you have any tips to share on how to handle those nerves?
I think everybody at some point of time goes through imposter's complex, and I went through it for a really long time because I find myself a complete misfit in the fashion industry because I'm very uncomfortable with the notions of fashion. I'm middle class, and for me, I've always wanted to make clothes that people could wear for a lifetime. When you don't have money, you learn to value it. And I would never buy something like most of my clothes are from Uniqlo. I love the brand. I would never, ever buy something that I would throw away. I don't believe in disposable consumption. So fashion teaches you to be disposable because unless things are disposable, you don't create larger business by ensnaring people to buy more and more. I think we have managed to create a business. The brand has never gone in discount in 20 years because I think when people come to buy Sabyasachi, they know that they can keep it for a lifetime. So when you run a fashion business with a philosophy that's almost anti-fashion, you do suffer from imposter syndrome, but then you learn to deal with the fact that you're boring, that you learn to deal with the fact that you're repetitive. You learn to deal with the fact that, you have critics who will write you off every single day. But then slowly and slowly, you learn to get over that by having faith in yourself. And like I said, that it's a matter of time till the world starts believing in you. I've done pretty much the same clothes over the last 20 years. And people at many point of time in my life have written me off, said that I'm boring, said that my clothes are not relevant. But the same people at some point of time have eaten their hat and come back and also proclaimed at the same time that I'm a genius. I don't think you should get bothered about what people have to say about you. If you have a vision and if you have conviction about your craft, you should just stick on with it.
And I mean, you've covered so much advice there already, but do you have any particular advice for aspiring fashion designers or aspiring entrepreneurs from your experiences?
Like I have already given a lot of advice on this talk, but I would just like to say to them that it's an amazing time for you to come up with a new business, because you can only come up with a new business at a time when people's minds are ready for a reset. So, challenge convention, bring out your own originality, believe in your conviction, because if there was ever a time when people were waiting to give new things a chance, it's now.
And you've spoken very proudly about Kolkata and Indian fashion. Did you know back when you started, did you foresee that Indian fashion would become such a leader on the world stage that people all around the world would be desperate to buy from Indian designers, or is that something that surprised you over 20 years?
At the sound of at the fear of sounding immodest, I can tell you that I knew it all even on the first year of my collection, because you see, there are certain greater universal truths that you know or you don't know. The biggest problem with India is that, we have never been able to stand for ourselves and market ourselves. We have always been subservient, and we have always become a production hub for luxury brands all over the world and produce some of the finest things that they have taken and put their labels on. And when I look at the history of India, where else will you get the diversity of craft, the cultural heritage? Because it's not something that's only 200 years old or 300 years old. It's a difference between old money and new money. India's old culture, and when you have something that as old as this, it's just a matter of time. History and business cycles and destiny all move around in very cyclical ways. And I knew that it would only be a time when India would be recognized. And I also told myself that I need to work very hard to make sure that I ride that wave when it happens.
Incredible. And how do you see Indian fashion and your industry shaping the country going forward? Do you see a place for art in driving these powerful dialogues between change makers and influencers to create positive change?
Absolutely. When I look at Indian fashion right now, there is so much diversity and there was so much of youth, and there is so much of new voices that's coming up. India has such a strong opinionated fashion industry right now. There are young designers who I would actually think are far, far, far better than I am. It's just that I got lucky because I had a head start, and I'm good with my marketing. But when I look at the younger generation in India, I see a very inspired generation. I see a generation that is very proud to be Indian, which is very heartening to see. And I think together, the youth of this country is going to just catapult India right to the top.
Mm-hmm. Well, what a positive and optimistic note to end on. Sabyasachi, I wish I could have more time with you. You are such an inspiration to many people around the world, and your clothes are just gorgeous, as you will know already. So thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful having you. Thank you so much to everybody watching. If you missed the beginning of this session, or you want to watch any other sessions from today or previous ABLF sessions, please do go to the platform and make sure you watch them back. Thank you all for joining us today, and remember that we are back every month featuring global leaders in powerful conversations.